Joey Pigza, Chapter 6. It's called Who. My day started out great. All the 4th and 5th grade classes got to go to the Amish farm for a field trip. There must have been about 100 of us because we filled 2 long orange buses. My morning meds were working and I had a window seat and I just loved watching all the cars and houses and fields speeding by. And when Mrs. Maxey was busy with other kids, I sat up on my knees and I stuck my head out the top window and I felt the breeze sweep past me so fast and hard it made everything in my head stand still. That was the best part of my day right there, sticking my head out the window like a dog. When we got off the bus, Mrs. Maxey and Mrs. Deebs and 2 other teachers and a gang of moms had us all line up, and Mrs. Maxey gave everyone the lecture about respecting differences in our cultures, so no pointing and snickering or unpleasant comments or you sit on the bus. You got that? We did or we didn't, but nobody knew which just yet. Once that was out of the way, we marched toward the front steps of the farmhouse as if we were a line of ants dressed in clothes. "Stop," hollered Mrs. Deebs when we reached the steps. When she said stop, she meant it because she had extra short hair and a big head on a really wide body that there was no getting around. Every time her head moved left or right, I thought it was about to roll down her sloping shoulders like a boulder down a hill. 2 clean-looking Amish girls in long blue dresses and starched white aprons came out and said, "Welcome." The Amish had been in Lancaster County since the 1700s. "We are a people who keep alive the traditions of the past. Please follow us inside to see our plain and simple way of life, our crafts, and our cooking." For a moment, I thought how it would have been so funny if kids took a field trip to my house when me and my grandma were living together. We'd step out the front door and say, "Welcome. Our place looks like a tornado hit. Run around inside like we do and have a blast." The Amish girls led us across the porch, which had a line of rocking chairs. So while I was waiting my turn to get inside, I ran from chair to chair, giving each one a good push as if a family of ghosts was rocking, until one of the moms gave me a look and pointed to the end of the line, which meant I had already lost my place. Finally, I stepped through the front door in the large room to one side were a bunch of old ladies with handkerchief hats on their heads. They were huddled together like a circle of mushrooms after a rainstorm, and hand-sewing a big quilt with huge sunflower stars in the middle. In the next room, more ladies were hooking rugs and doing needlepoint. And even though the moms were all oohing and awing as if they were watching fireworks, I started not to listen to any of it because I smelled something really good and sweet coming from down the hall. And after one whiff of that smell, I couldn't pay attention to anything else. We passed a few more rooms, and I didn't care if the Amish were doing card tricks or shaving their beards off. My eyes were watered over, and that smell had me staggering around like a zombie. After a lot of very polite and very boring questions and answers about Amish life, one of the girls led us the rest of the way down the hall into a kitchen. By then, the sweet smell was so powerful, my nose felt like it was swelling up, getting bigger and bigger, and I had to touch it with both hands to make sure it wasn't like Pinocchio's. It was still the same old size, but that smell was so overwhelming to me, I could not get enough of it, and I just kept gulping down huge breaths, as if I could eat the air. "Every product made in this typical Amish kitchen is based on what nature provides," one of the girls said. "We make butter, we make cheese, bread and biscuits, jam and jelly, but we are especially famous for our molasses shoe-fly pie." At first I didn't think I heard her right. "A pie made out of shoes and flies and molasses?" I said to Seth. "I bet it's really good," he said. "You should ask for some with extra flies." "Yeah," I said, and I was thinking about the pie so much I didn't hear another word the girl said about her cooking secrets. She thought of a pie made out of shoes and flies. The thought of a pie made out of shoes and flies was amazing me. And really, I didn't care if they made their pie out of sweat socks and wiggle worms. As long as they turned out this sweet smelling, I'd eat 'em. Even as I stood there, the sweetness was making me dizzy. I experimented and I closed my eyes and I took a deep breath and I had to open my eyes quickly as I stumbled into Seth and he gave me a shove back and called me a moron. And by the time I pulled myself together, Mrs. Deebs was saying, "Okay, everyone line up for a little piece of shoe-fly pie before we go to the garden, and later we're going to the barn." All I could think about was shoes and flies as I stood in line, and from where I was in the back, I didn't see any kids spit it out, so it must have been good. I dropped down on my knees to see what kind of shoes the Amish girls were wearing. They may have had some special shoe tradition I didn't know about. Maybe their shoes were made out of licorice or rock candy. But their dresses were so long I couldn't see their shoes, and a mom gave me a stern look, excuse me, and yanked me up by the back of my shirt as if I was trying to peek up their dresses. Mind your manners, young man, the mom said with her eyebrows raised. I'm just doing research, I said. When it was close to my turn, Mrs. Maxey called me to one side and whispered, That pie is not good for you, Joey. It's got too much sugar, so it's better to just stick with fruit. She must have seen the hurt look on my face because I couldn't hide it. It felt like my whole face turned into a crumpled piece of paper, and then she reached forward and handed me a small white napkin with an apple slice on it that had already turned brown on the edges. It has cinnamon on it, she said. It's very good. I don't want this, I replied. I want the shoe fly pie. Don't make an issue out of it, she said firmly. We're doing what's best for you. And she didn't want to talk about it anymore because other kids were beginning to bunch up at the back door and stare at us. Now move along, she said to the kids. If you've already had your pie, go over to the pumpkin patch and carve it. And then she stopped talking like she was saying something wrong in front of me, as if she wanted to spell it out like adults do when they want to keep a secret from kids who can't spell. I took the apple slice and I put it in my back pocket, and I kept on wondering why she didn't finish telling me about the carving. It didn't take long to find out. A few minutes later, we were all in the pumpkin patch with our baby pumpkins that we were allowed to pick off the vines. The Amish girls were handing out wood-handled carving tools, and all of the kids were sitting at picnic tables surrounded by the moms who were helping them. I ran up to the Amish girl and I got my tool, but Mrs. Maxey was right on me. Joey, you can't have that knife, she said. It's dangerous. I looked at the knife. The blade was really stubby and about an inch long, and it wasn't even that sharp. It was more like safety scissors. It's not dangerous, I said. Besides, my mom lets me slice bread and stuff. Well, we don't want you to hurt yourself, she said calmly. I want to carve one too, I said. You can draw on one now, she suggested, and I held out a black marker. We'll carve it later, I promise. I want to do it now with everyone else, I said, and I held the knife behind my back. Later, Mrs. Maxey said, all the moms are busy helping other kids. Now, I shouted, and my fist balled up, and I could feel that surge of energy running through me like nothing in the world was going to keep me from carving this pumpkin. Give me the knife, she ordered, and she held out her hand. No, I said, and stepped back. Then I threw it as far as I could into the pumpkin patch. I think it's time for you to go have a timeout in the bus, she said, getting tired of me. If you can sit still for 10 minutes and calm down, you can come back here and draw on your pumpkin. Well, everyone else gets to carve theirs, I said, pointing to all the other kids who were busy scratching out eyes and teeth with their unsharp baby knives. We just don't want any more accidents, she said, and pointed toward the bus in front of the house. Be a good boy and go directly to the bus. I'll be watching from here, and when we get ready to tour the barn, I'll come get you. I turned around, I stomped back along the farmhouse, and for a moment, I thought I'd just keep walking all the way home and get my own knife and carve my own pumpkin. But I felt Mrs. Maxey's eyes staring at the back of my head, so I didn't. And then I passed a window and smelled that sweet pie again. I glanced back over my shoulder, and some kid was pulling on her sleeve and talking to her. So instead of walking home or going to the bus, I sneaked around to the front door of that farmhouse. The quilt ladies were still working as I marched by real quick down to the kitchen. The Amish girls were out in the garden, and no one was on guard, so I grabbed a whole shoe fly pie off the table because it popped into my head to do it, and by then my feet were moving a mile a minute, and I opened a side door and I headed out beyond the barn toward the cornfield. I ducked down low and I ran between 2 rows of corn stalks until I couldn't see nothing around me but plants. I sat down, I stuck my finger through the brown crust as if it were a knife, and I carved out a broken-looking Halloween face on the pie, and when I was finished, I stuck my finger in my mouth. It was sweet as the little packets of sugar I eat at Dunkin' Donuts. Sweeter, maybe. More like log cabin pancake syrup right out of the bottle the way I drink it, if Mom, even for a second, lets it stay out on the counter. And the pie was almost as runny as the syrup. It wasn't gelled up like the cafeteria cherry pie, so I picked the top crust off and I ate that first while I stirred my finger around trying to find the shoes and the flies. But it was all molasses, So I felt tricked, but I didn't know how. Then I kept sticking my 2 curled fingers in and licking them off, and the more I ate, the faster I wanted to eat it, and nothing else mattered. Not the real flies sticking to my fingers and lips, not the wind blowing through the cornstalk, not the voices overheard of kids carving pumpkins. Nothing. Just eating the pie, tasting the sugar melt all over my tongue, and ooze down into my belly like a slippery, sugary snake. And when it was almost finished, I bent the tin pie plate in half, tilted back my head, and poured down the last brown drops of it right down my throat. Then I licked the plate like a dog, and by the time I finished, my mind was a mess, and my legs were thumping. I was ready to run around the entire world. I had a funny sound in my head, kind of a hissing, like when the TV station goes off the air at night. There's nothing but static, but really loud static, and no words at all, getting louder like tires speeding down the road, coming right at me. My eyes felt so swollen with the flood of energy inside my head that I could only see the tops of my cheeks and a smudge where my nose fit on, and a bigger blur beyond that. I took a deep breath, and the air gushed into my lungs and lifted me up, and suddenly I was running and crashing through the stalks of the cornfield. I had my arms stuck out like the wings of a plane, and the long curved leaves sliced me up, but I didn't feel the stinging. I didn't feel my feet even hitting the ground. I didn't feel the jolt when I tripped forward and slammed in the corn and clods of dirt with my chest and bounced straight up and kept going. I was running so fast and breathing so deep that I thought I could take off out of that cornfield and fly in the air, and into the clouds and look down on the farm and bus and the kids and Mrs. Maxey, who would be pointing at me. Then before I could slow down, I was suddenly running out of the field, and from there I headed for the barn where there was a huge open door. So I went inside, and I was not saying to myself, "See the ladder, climb the ladder." No, I was just climbing the ladder before I knew it. And I was way up high on the big timbers playing a crazy kind of snakes and ladder game, sliding down the tilted beams, climbing others like a monkey on a coconut tree. My spring was wound so tight that I was more like a rat in a maze, without words or feelings or any ideas about myself and what I should be doing other than go, 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 up, 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 faster, higher, until there was nothing more above me but the roof and an owl. One of those big white owls with the huge dark eyes and hooked beak, which is where I stopped. "Who?" it said, "who?" And I answered, "Joey Pigza, that's who." "Who?" it said again, and it kept its eyes right on my face. For some reason, it was the same as if someone had asked me why I ate the pie and why I was all the way at the top of the barn. And before I knew it, my gears started shifting, and all that energy inside me went somewhere else. I sat as still as a bookend with my chin on my knees, and I looked down from the rafter, and the ground was way beneath me, with 100 really small 4th and 5th graders pointing up into the air, and one of them was saying my name. It was Mrs. Maxey. "Joey," she hollered and waved her hands over her head. "Joey, don't move. We're coming to get you." And in a few minutes, the biggest ladder I ever seen was being raised up from the back of a horse and wagon, and an old man with a long white beard wearing a big black hat was climbing up as if he was Santa for the Amish. "Don't worry," he said. "Stay put. That owl won't bite." "Me either," I said, squeezing some words out of my brain. I stood up on both feet, and I started to walk the big beam, and everyone below looked so small, and they were all yelling for me to sit down. But I didn't want to sit down. It was the last thing in the world I wanted to do. I just kept walking across the huge room until below me was a pile of hay bales. And I had seen about 1,000,000 movies of kids falling in hay, bouncing up and down and running off. So it seemed no different than playing stuntman. So I yelled out, "Geronimo!" as I jumped. The best part was being in the air, sort of wiggling as if I was doing a hula dance to keep from landing on my head. And then I hit the hay with my feet first, and it wasn't soft like the movies, but so hard that it felt like something had landed on me instead of me landing on it. I didn't even sink into it like leaves or anything. It was more like landing on a huge pincushion, and each time I bounced down on it, I was jabbed 100 more times. But none of it hurt as much as my ankle when I tried to stand up. I must have twisted it, and instead of being able to run away, I tried to crawl. But by then, another old farmer was on me, and "I got him," he hollered to those who were still to come. "Joey," Mrs. Maxey said when she came running over, "what got into you?" And then she must have seen the molasses on my face and shirt. She put two and two together. Her face first got mad, but when the farmer put me down on my feet and I fell over to one side because of the pain in my ankle, she got all worried again. "Let's see that ankle," she said, and untied my shoe with her nervous hands, which hurt because my ankle was a little swollen and looked more yellow than it should have. "Oh, Joey," she said, and tried to feel for broken bones. "What are we going to do here?" "I didn't mean to get hurt," I said. "I just wanted to jump in the hay." "I know. It's just that there's always a difference between what you think you are doing and what happens to you and everyone else." I looked up, and there was Maria Dombrowski writing my name down on a pad because Mrs. Maxey had told her to keep a list of everyone who got out of line. And everyone else, teachers and parents and Amish, were all looking at me as if they were at a zoo and I was in a cage. "I'll be okay," I said, and I pulled my foot out of her hands and stood up. But my shoe didn't fit anymore, so they can have it for their pie. I pointed at the Amish girls, and they started to giggle and cover their mouths. Then everyone started to laugh, except for Mrs. Maxey. I don't think she got the joke. That's the end of chapter 6.